Given the explosive content of last year's wallet-destroying releases, you might be forgiven thinking 2018 hasn't been up to snuff. What we have seen this year, however, have been some truly genre-defining and serious course-correcting games such as Far Cry 5 and God of War, as well as a number of titles that blew us out of the water when it came to their supreme polish and memorable gameplay. There is, however, another side to this. For every intense shooter, there's a buggy hack and slash. For every fantasy epic, there's a tired remake no one actually wanted. Yes, 2018 has unfortunately given us a balancing act of games in which every AAA masterpiece has a counterpoint in something far less savory. Now, this list isn't specifically about the worst games, but rather those that simply fizzled out and failed to impress. With that in mind, here are the top 10 disappointing games of 2018 so far. The LABO was already a quirky cocked eyebrow of an idea to begin with. Create peripherals using cardboard in the hopes of bringing back that childhood nostalgia from the 80s when we could be entertained by a box and some crayons. Having been on a hot streak with the Switch and a number of excellent releases, was given mostly the benefit of the doubt that in practice the LABO could be a great step. Our expectations didn't skyrocket, however. Nintendo's known for taking big risks, loving peripherals and testing the water with quirky gimmicks only to improve upon them down the road. While the LABO didn't particularly ruin our expectations, it still failed to impress. As an educational tool, it can be great for young kids, but as a practical application for gaming, well, only now has one of the kits been used for a proper full-length game. The LABO symbolizes the hope we have and the trust we put in Nintendo with their zany ideas, but this time it just let us down. If I told you there was a game combining the fast-paced hack-and-slash action of Devil May Cry, the parkour of Assassin's Creed, and the insanely massive bosses of Shadow of the Colossus, I'd have to give you a moment to clean the drool which is now froth from your mouth. Extinction promised an experience just like that. With epic trailers, killer combat, and fantastically fluid traversal, it looked to be a worthy successor to the hack-and-slash genre and would bring about an all-new RPG element unlike anything we had played before. Unfortunately, each and every one of its selling points were dull, buggy, repetitive, and frustrating. The game was more bothersome than anything, and you never quite felt like the badass you were supposed to be. We all expected Extinction to be another heavy hitter, but instead it took a swing, missed, and tripped over its own feet. LEGO games aren't known for being difficult. What they are known for is cheeky humor, massive rosters, and a great mix of puzzles and platforming to progress through each game. When it came time for the Incredibles version, however, it was as if the entire notion of the series went out the window simply to bank on the recently released movie. The world was small and empty, puzzles were nearly non-existent, and the roster was filled with mostly useless characters we had no reason to care about. This was the first big LEGO game since LEGO Dimensions went down, and it honestly felt like a cash grab more than a legitimate entry in the LEGO video games. This title was much less than incredible. Much like Extinction, Attack on Titan 2 fell victim to its own marketing. Fans of the massively popular and creepy manga were ecstatic to hear about the sequel in development, positive that whatever changes the game would bring would only elevate what the previous game had brought to the table. While Extinction can be forgiven for being a new IP, Attack on Titan 2 was already established, and the sequel has been considered mediocre at best, unless you're a diehard fan. The Titans are awful, lumpy-looking creatures, the plot is drawn out and tiresome, and it seems only the combat was mildly improved but still felt boring. You'd think in a series about giant naked humanoids and using grappling hooks and swords to slaughter them it would be a little more interesting and intense, but Attack on Titan 2 is far too niche of a game for its own good. We've had some fairly terrifying horror games before, but nothing promised quite the experience Agony had in store for us. Dropped helplessly into the pits of hell, surrounded by darkness, screams of terror and pain, demons and foul creatures devouring those they find. It was terror on a new level with gorgeous graphics and unsightly, terrible abominations. What we got instead was a very short game, relatively barren of anything scary or much of consequence. And the idea of edgy and truly horrifying terror was replaced with some basic, vaguely sexual content and reused textures for the environment. The anticipation for Agony was incredibly high, but as soon as we got our hands on it we were horrified. But not in the way they had intended. Metal Gear Survive is something of a victim of its name. This was to be the first big entry into Metal Gear post-Kojima, which means people were already going into it dead set on the idea of not liking it, which also meant the studio had more to improve. Add to that the bland gameplay and generic survival tropes, and what we got was mediocre at best. It isn't necessarily unplayable, but given that the studio felt it was perfectly reasonable to continue the Metal Gear series without the mind behind it, we would have expected the game to offer at least some facsimile of the long-standing series. Yet here we are. Ironically enough, had the game not carried the Metal Gear name, it quite possibly could have been far better received. Despite becoming favorable upon release by many fans of the genre, State of Decay 2 launched with several severe bugs and problems that greatly hindered its potential success. Not only had we hoped for a great successor to the previous game, Xbox has been starving for a solid exclusive title, and State of Decay 2 looked like it could take up that mantle. Upon launch, however, the game felt bland and generic, content was repetitive, and serious bugs plagued the game constantly. What we had hoped would be a feather in the cap to get Xbox back on track fell flat, yet on the bright side, there are a number of fans willing to overlook these faults and continue to fiercely defend the game. This game was a roller coaster of expectation. At first, no one expected this game to even be a thing. No one was asking for SHAQ-FU to make a comeback after its 1993 flop. But once the game was funded and we got to see a trailer, we realized this could actually be the game to redeem itself. Shaq himself is known for his great sense of humor, and the gameplay looks like over-the-top fun. And surely modern enhancements, fourth wall breaks, and self-referential jokes would deliver a great experience. What we got in the end was a game with a poor hitbox, repetitive and unresponsive gameplay, and a sense of humor still from the 90s. Did we think this could make up for its horrible predecessor? Absolutely. Much like State of Decay 2, Sea of Thieves is another Xbox exclusive gem that we had all been banking would help bring the Xbox back to the top. This game has jaw-droppingly gorgeous water mechanics and graphics, a lovable Pixar-esque feel, and pirates. How could they go wrong? Despite having the makings of a great game, Sea of Thieves launched to be more of a social hub with a game attached rather than a real game. Missions were simple and repetitive, and if you happened to be playing without your friends, it was just awful. The game has received some updates and a number of big content additions are on their way, but even we here at COGconnected had a blast in the beta, until we discovered the full game was more of the same. Sea of Thieves could redeem itself down the road, but the damage has been done. Poor Cliffy B. Foregoing the explanation of Cliffy B's more wild and belligerent actions this year, Cliffy B decided that since Battle Royale games murdered his baby Lawbreakers, he would fight fire with fire and put out his own Battle Royale game named Radical Heights. It had an 80s punk aesthetic complete with plenty of attitude. However, the studio was in such an incredible rush to capitalize on the Battle Royale fad that they forgot to make a game actually worth playing. Radical Heights touted itself as the latest and greatest in the new, burgeoning genre. However, the game released was, at best, still in alpha. Horrible bugs, flat textures, and every possible problem from a rushed release poured the potential for Radical Heights down the drain, later leading to the closing of the studio. So what games have disappointed you the most in 2018? And if you disagree with our list, let us know in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to COGconnected for all things gaming, and for news, reviews, features, and more, visit us online at COGconnected.com.